Why do I feel like I am the side chick in my own home?
Sophia sat quietly on the edge of the soft sofa, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Across the room, Daniel and Ruth were laughing together, their heads almost touching, sharing jokes only they seemed to understand. Daniel's hand brushed Ruth's arm, and she leaned closer, giggling, as if the world belonged to just them. Sophia's heart sank with every smile, every soft whisper between them. She tried to tell herself it was harmless, that Ruth was just a friend, but the warmth in Daniel's eyes told another story, one that did not include her. She felt invisible, a shadow in her own home, as if her presence was meaningless, unnoticed, unimportant. Every gesture they shared cut Sophia deeper than she could explain. Daniel held Ruth's hand for just a second too long, his thumb brushing against hers while he laughed at a joke she did not understand. Ruth leaned on his shoulder, whispering softly, and he nodded, his gaze full of affection. Sophia's tea had gone cold in her hands because she could not bear to drink it. She remembered the day she thought she had married the perfect man, the day she had imagined nights filled with shared laughter, soft words, and love that would protect her. Now, watching them together, she realized that those dreams had been stolen before they even began. Every laugh, every soft touch, every secret look between Daniel and Ruth was a reminder that she was already losing her husband to someone else while sitting right in front of him. Sophia's mind wandered through painful memories she had tried to forget. The dinners when Daniel ignored her completely, smiling only at Ruth. The weekend trips he suggested, pretending they were for family or work, but which always ended with Ruth at his side. The way he would share jokes, little secrets, and soft words with Ruth, while she sat there, smiling quietly, trying to pretend nothing hurt. She had stayed patient, calm, and quiet, believing that love meant forgiveness and endurance. But now, as she watched them play these love games in her living room, she understood that endurance could not fill the hollow ache in her chest. Tears burned Sophia's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She could not show the world or Daniel that she was broken. And yet, her heart ached like it was breaking into pieces. She whispered softly to herself, "Am I really the side chick in my own marriage?" The words were heavy, bitter, and impossible to swallow. And as Daniel wrapped his arm around Ruth's waist, pulling her closer as they laughed, Sophia felt like the house itself had turned against her. The warmth of the room mocked her cold heart. In that moment, the calm and patient woman she had always been felt small, unseen, and utterly alone, trapped in a marriage where her own husband had already chosen someone else. Before we dive into Sophia's heartbreaking story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the shocking twists ahead. Sophia was always calm, even when the world seemed to push her down. At work, her colleagues often dumped extra tasks on her desk, claiming she was efficient enough to handle it all. Other workers complained, argued, or demanded fairness, but Sophia quietly accepted every burden, finishing her work with perfect care. She never raised her voice, never complained, and never blamed anyone, even when she stayed late, missing lunch and leaving tired and hungry. Her patience was endless, her heart gentle, and everyone who knew her admired her quiet strength, not knowing the heavy weight she carried inside. Even at home, Sophia's calmness showed itself in ways that went unnoticed. When Daniel returned late from work or meetings, she never questioned him. She prepared his meals quietly, cleaned the house, and waited patiently for his attention, even when he spent hours with Ruth in the same living room, laughing, teasing, and sharing moments that should have been for a wife. Sophia's heart ached each time, but she never complained. She believed love meant giving space, letting people be happy, and keeping peace, even if it meant hiding her own pain deep inside. There were other moments, too, when Sophia should have spoken up but didn't. During family gatherings, she noticed how Ruth's presence seemed to always steal Daniel's attention. Daniel would whisper jokes in Ruth's ear, hold her hand lightly, and look at her with soft eyes, while Sophia's smile stayed frozen on her face. She could have confronted him, asked for respect, or expressed her feelings, but she didn't. Instead, she remained calm, hiding her heartache behind a polite smile, silently wishing Daniel would see her, recognize her presence, and value her the way he valued Ruth. But he never did. Sophia's patience was not weakness, it was her strength, though sometimes it left her feeling invisible. She endured small betrayals, overlooked slights, and ignored the gnawing feeling that she was being forgotten, all while trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect friend, the perfect daughter. Even when her heart whispered that things were not right, she stayed quiet, believing love could fix what words could not. Little did she know, her silence and patience, her calmness and humility, were building a world where she would one day realize that love alone might not be enough, and that being calm could not protect her from the heartbreak waiting quietly in her home. Sophia sat at the dining table, her plate untouched, as Daniel and Ruth laughed together across the room. They were planning a small weekend trip, whispering and smiling in a way that made her stomach twist with pain. Daniel held Ruth's hand lightly, brushing it against hers, and leaned close to hear her laugh. Sophia's hands gripped the edge of the table. She had loved him for so long, believed in him with all her heart, and now it felt like the love she gave was invisible. She wanted to speak, to stop them, to remind Daniel that she existed, that she was his wife. But the calm, patient woman inside her kept her silent. She only swallowed hard, pretending to be interested in the conversation, while the truth burned inside her. At work, Sophia had always handled heavy loads without complaint, quietly solving problems that others avoided. She had believed that patience was strength, that a woman who endured without anger or shouting was someone worth loving. Yet now, in her own home, her patience seemed useless. Daniel's attention, which should have been hers, was given freely to Ruth. He shared stories, dreams, even small decisions with Ruth first, asking her opinion as if Sophia's thoughts did not matter. Sophia remembered the countless times she had smiled politely while he talked endlessly about Ruth's successes, Ruth's plans, Ruth's opinions. Each story felt like another confirmation of her growing fear. She was not his priority. There were moments Sophia could not forget. One evening, they were all in the living room, watching a movie. Daniel made popcorn, not for Sophia, but for Ruth, handing it to her with a playful grin. Ruth leaned back on his shoulder, laughing at his jokes, while Sophia sat quietly on the other side, her heart tightening with each passing second. She had prepared the room, cleaned the house, and even tried to make the evening special, but all of that went unnoticed. Daniel didn't offer her a smile, a laugh, or even a glance. Every small act of love he reserved for Ruth. Sophia wanted to feel angry, wanted to shout, "I am your wife." But she couldn't. Her calmness, her patience, the quiet love that defined her, chained her voice. She swallowed the hurt, pretending to watch the movie, while her heart silently broke. The hardest part, Sophia realized, was that no one else seemed to notice the unfairness. Friends, family, even neighbors praised her for being so calm and sweet, saying that she must be happy in her marriage. But only she knew the truth. Every hug Daniel gave Ruth, every whisper, every laugh in her presence, reminded her of the life she had imagined and the life she was living instead, one where she was almost invisible, almost forgotten, and completely ignored. Sophia felt trapped in her own home, her patience making her a silent witness to the love Daniel gave someone else. And yet, despite the pain, despite the betrayal she could feel in her bones, she remained quiet, her gentle heart holding on to the fragile hope that one day Daniel would see her. One day, he would choose her. Sophia's mornings had become a quiet ritual of invisible suffering. She woke early, prepared breakfast, and set the table neatly, hoping Daniel would notice her effort. But every morning, Daniel was already texting Ruth or calling her on the phone, smiling and laughing as if the world belonged only to them. Sophia would pour him a cup of tea, but he barely glanced her way, distracted by Ruth's messages or plans. Sometimes, he even joked about something Ruth said, laughing so hard that Sophia had to hide the lump in her throat. She had long stopped complaining, long stopped asking for attention, long stopped believing that she could matter when Ruth existed. Her patience had become both her shield and her prison. Even simple errands became painful reminders of her place in the marriage. One afternoon, Daniel suggested they go shopping together, but when Ruth called to ask advice, he left Sophia standing in the living room, a bag of groceries in her hands, smiling faintly, pretending nothing had happened. Later that day, Ruth appeared, and Daniel's eyes lit up like a child's, holding her hand as they walked through the aisles, laughing over small jokes, whispering secrets Sophia would never know. She followed quietly, carrying the groceries alone, her heart sinking with every step. Every glance, every gesture, every shared laugh between them shouted the same truth. She was not the woman who mattered most to her own husband. Sophia's friends noticed she seemed quieter than usual. At gatherings, She smiled politely while Daniel and Ruth whispered to each other across the room. Ruth leaned on Daniel, shared inside jokes, and even helped him with tasks that Sophia had once done lovingly for him. Once, Sophia tried to interject, suggesting an idea for dinner, and Daniel barely acknowledged her words, nodding only when Ruth repeated the same idea with excitement. The room seemed to blur around Sophia as she realized she had become a shadow in her own life. Her calmness and patience, which had once been her strength, now made her invisible. She wanted to cry, to shout, to demand her place, but the words got stuck, caught in the cage of her gentle heart. The nights were even harder. Sophia would sit in the living room, her hands folded neatly in her lap, as Daniel and Ruth cuddled on the couch, whispering soft words, holding each other's hands, and sharing dreams that were meant for a couple. Sophia served them tea, refilled their snacks, and smiled politely when they offered her nothing in return. Her heart pounded with pain, but she stayed calm, her patience stronger than her sorrow. In the quiet of the night, she whispered to herself, "Is this my life? Am I really invisible in my own marriage?" The silence of the house answered her, as cold and empty as her chest felt. And yet, even in her heartache, Sophia did not lash out. She did not scream. She only sat quietly, a calm and patient woman, slowly realizing that love alone might not be enough to save her from being forgotten. Sophia's life had become a rhythm of quiet suffering. Every day, she watched Daniel and Ruth act like a couple, laughing, whispering, and sharing secrets that should have belonged to her. At dinner, Daniel would pour Ruth her favorite juice, while Sophia sat patiently, her own glass untouched, unnoticed. When they watched television together, Daniel leaned closer to Ruth, held her hand lightly, and laughed at her jokes, leaving Sophia to smile politely, hiding the ache that stabbed her chest. She had long stopped asking for attention or expressing her pain. Her calmness, which had once been her strength, now felt like a cage, holding her in a silent suffering she could not escape. At work, Sophia still remained the patient woman everyone admired. She took on more tasks than anyone else, always finishing perfectly, never complaining, never blaming. Her colleagues praised her for her strength, but no one knew the cost of her patience. Her heart was heavy with loneliness, and every day she went home hoping for Daniel's love to return, even though she could see it was reserved for Ruth. The small moments, Daniel whispering Ruth's name, sharing soft jokes, holding her hand, grew like thorns in Sophia's heart, and she endured them in silence. Even when friends hinted that something felt wrong in her marriage, she brushed it off, believing that her patience and calmness would save her relationship. One afternoon, Sophia went out with her closest friends for tea, trying to forget the pain at home. Her friends watched her carefully, noticing the quiet sadness that she could no longer hide completely. They asked gentle questions, watching her avoid eye contact and bite her lip as she spoke about her day. Finally, one of her friends, Ada, leaned forward and said softly, "Sophia, you are too easygoing with Daniel and Ruth. We see it. You let things happen, and it's breaking your heart. You must speak up. You cannot keep quiet and expect things to change by themselves." Sophia's hands trembled as she listened, her patience and calmness clashing with a new, unexpected fear. Could she speak up? Would Daniel even hear her? Or was it already too late? For the first time, Sophia considered a possibility she had never dared to imagine. She had always believed that calmness and patience could solve everything, that love alone could fix her marriage. But now, seeing her friends' concerned faces and hearing their advice, she realized that silence might have allowed Ruth to take a place that belonged to her. Her heart ached with the thought, but a small spark of courage began to grow inside her. Maybe it was time to speak, to remind Daniel of the wife he had promised to love and cherish. Maybe it was time to stop being invisible in her own home. Yet, even as the thought came, Sophia felt a wave of fear. Speaking up could change everything, for better or worse. And for the first time, she wondered if Daniel's heart still truly belonged to her. If you're shocked by what Daniel is doing, imagine what happens next. Subscribe now and stay tuned for the full emotional story. Sophia sat quietly on the edge of the sofa again, her eyes fixed on Daniel and Ruth across the room. They were planning something together, a small weekend getaway, but the way Daniel leaned close to Ruth, his arm brushing against hers, made Sophia's chest tighten with pain. He whispered to her, laughing softly, while Ruth's hand rested on his arm. Sophia's fingers trembled slightly as she held her cup of tea, but she stayed silent, her calmness holding her in place even as her heart broke. Each soft glance, each gentle touch, each shared laugh reminded her that she was invisible in her own marriage. Even small moments became unbearable. One evening, Daniel and Ruth cooked together in the kitchen, laughing at little mistakes, feeding each other bites of food, and sharing playful jokes. Sophia stood quietly by the counter, chopping vegetables for the dinner she had prepared for all of them. She smiled politely when Daniel passed her a plate, but inside, her heart ached with every giggle he shared with Ruth. She remembered the countless nights she had waited patiently for his attention, preparing his favorite meals, serving him tea, offering comfort, and yet she was always ignored. Ruth had become his center, while she faded into the background, silent and unnoticed. At work, her colleagues began to notice a subtle change. Sophia still completed every task flawlessly, still smiled politely, and still endured long hours without complaint. But her eyes sometimes betrayed her, reflecting the pain she carried quietly. She tried to hide it, convincing herself that speaking up or showing anger would not help. She had always been patient, always calm, always kind, and she believed that endurance was a form of strength. But slowly, she began to wonder if patience without recognition was nothing more than quiet suffering. Watching Daniel and Ruth together day after day, Sophia realized that no amount of calmness could force him to see her, to love her, or to value her. Her friends had warned her, but now she understood their words more clearly than ever. Sophia felt trapped in her own home, a silent observer of the love that Daniel gave freely to Ruth. She remembered Ada's advice: she had to speak up, she had to remind Daniel of her presence. Yet fear gripped her heart. What if speaking up changed nothing? What if he continued to choose Ruth over her? She watched Daniel lean closer to Ruth once more, whispering soft words, and her chest ached so deeply that she almost wanted to leave the room and run far away. And yet, her calm, patient heart stayed, holding her in place, waiting, silently hoping that maybe, just maybe, Daniel would finally see her and remember that she was his wife too. Sophia woke that Monday morning feeling unusually tired. Her chest felt heavy, her head throbbed, and the laughter she had endured from Daniel and Ruth over the weekend seemed to echo painfully in her mind. She tried to ignore it, as she always did, sipping her tea quietly before heading to work. At the office, her tasks felt heavier than usual. Files piled up, deadlines pressed on her, and her colleagues noticed her pale face and sluggish steps. But Sophia said nothing, kept her calm, and carried on, as she always had. Complaining had never been her way. Patience was her strength, even when it weighed on her soul. By midday, the exhaustion had worsened. Her hands shook as she typed, her vision blurred slightly, and a sharp pain pierced her chest. Sophia tried to stand, but her legs gave way beneath her. She collapsed onto the floor, startling her colleagues. Panic filled the room as someone rushed to call an ambulance. Sophia's calm demeanor had finally given way to the physical manifestation of her heartbreak, stress, and neglect. The office was in chaos, but she remained mostly conscious, whispering softly, "I'll be okay. I'm fine." Even as the paramedics lifted her onto a stretcher. Meanwhile, Daniel was at home, entirely unaware of the emergency unfolding. He was laughing with Ruth over their weekend plans, scrolling through messages and sharing quiet jokes. He didn't notice the silence that Sophia's absence had created in their house, didn't wonder why she hadn't called or texted. Hours passed before the hospital called him personally. The doctor's voice was calm but firm. "Mr. Daniel, your wife was rushed here today. She collapsed at work. We need you to come immediately." Panic gripped Daniel like a cold hand. His mind raced, heart pounding. For the first time, he realized how serious Sophia's situation was, but it was also too late for the moments he had ignored, the days he had laughed and whispered with Ruth while his wife silently suffered. At the hospital, Sophia lay in the quiet room, pale but awake, her thoughts racing faster than her heartbeat. She had survived the collapse, but the experience had opened her eyes fully to the reality she had been denying. Daniel's negligence, Ruth's constant presence in his life, and her own silence had all contributed to this breaking point. When Daniel finally arrived, breathless and guilty, she looked at him quietly, seeing the panic and fear on his face, but also knowing that the love she had given patiently for so long had been ignored. In that moment, Sophia realized that patience and calmness alone could no longer save her marriage. She had endured enough. She would leave, reclaim herself, and show Daniel that ignoring her love had consequences. That Sunday morning, the decision became clear. She would pack her bags and go to her friend Sarah's house, and for the first time in months, she would put herself first. Sophia arrived at her friend Sarah's house, her small bag in hand, heart still racing from the hospital and the long, tense morning. Sarah greeted her with wide, concerned eyes and a hug that felt like warmth after months of cold neglect. For the first time in weeks, Sophia felt safe, seen, and heard. She explained everything in trembling words. The way Daniel had ignored her, laughed with Ruth, and let her suffer silently, even to the point of collapsing at work. Sarah listened quietly, her hand holding Sophia's tightly, nodding, offering comfort, and reminding her that she deserved better. Sophia felt a spark of strength growing inside her. She had endured too much. It was finally time to take a stand. No sooner had Sophia settled in than she heard hurried footsteps outside. Sarah's eyes widened as a voice called her name. Sophia's heart sank. It was Daniel. And beside him, impossible to ignore, was Ruth, smiling lightly, hand holding Daniel's arm like she always did. Daniel's face was pale, his eyes wide, and his usual confidence was gone. "Sophia, please can we talk?" he pleaded, stepping forward. Ruth lingered behind him, casting curious glances, but for the first time, Sophia noticed something strange. Ruth's presence no longer made Daniel's words comforting. His panic, his desperation, were aimed solely at her. Sophia's heart, which had been aching for months, now felt a strange mixture of fear and quiet relief. Daniel took a deep breath, trying to explain, to apologize, to plead. "Sophia, I didn't know it was this bad. I made mistakes, but I love you. Ruth, she doesn't matter. It's always been you." His voice cracked as he spoke, shaking with emotion. Sophia's chest tightened, memories of months of being ignored and invisible flooding her mind. The dinners she had prepared, the nights she had waited patiently for him, the laughter and whispers he had shared with Ruth, all of it came rushing back. She felt her hands tremble as she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "Daniel," she said calmly but firmly, "I have loved you silently for too long. I have waited, been patient, and endured more than any person should. But your words cannot erase months of neglect." Sophia handed him the folder. Inside were the divorce papers. Daniel froze, the color draining from his face. Ruth stepped back, her smile fading as she realized that her presence no longer mattered. Daniel's voice failed him. He opened the papers, staring in disbelief, unable to form a single sentence. For the first time, Sophia saw a side of him she had never seen before. Shock, regret, and fear, but no control over her choice. Relief washed over Sophia like a cool breeze after a long, suffocating storm. She had done it. She had finally spoken her truth, claimed her dignity, and put herself first. Standing there, she felt her shoulders lift, her heart lighten, and a peace she had not felt in months settle inside her. Ruth was no longer the center of Daniel's world. For the first time, Sophia was in control of her life. Sophia turned to leave, her calm, patient face now radiating quiet strength. She walked out of the house, the sunlight warming her back, the bag on her shoulder feeling lighter than ever. Daniel remained frozen, words caught in his throat, Ruth beside him silent and powerless. Sophia didn't look back. For years, she had been the invisible wife, the patient woman, the one who endured quietly. But now, she was free. Free from neglect, free from heartbreak, free from a marriage that no longer respected her worth. And for the first time, she smiled truly, knowing that the life ahead, though unknown, was hers entirely. She had loved, endured, and finally, she had chosen herself. Sophia finally chose herself. If you want more powerful stories like this, hit subscribe and join our Storytime family. You won't regret it.